Welcome back to DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast to reflect on IndyCar's latest action at Mid-Ohio in a weekend where there was a lot going on off the track, but plenty of stories up and down the field on the track as well. Not quite the chaotic race we have seen previously at Road America or Gateway recently, but still one of plenty of storylines to talk about, as I said, with Pato O'Ward returning to victory lane for the first time since Toronto last year. Podium streak, which I think gone to 14-15 races we hadn't stood in the rostrum in, and McLaren's first 1-2 since their return to the series in 2020, with Christian Lundgaard finishing second in the week that he was announced to depart Arrow McLaren. And we have a whole episode which was released yesterday on Monday, depending on how you look at it. Compared to when this episode goes out, we reflect on the news of Scott Dixon and Felix Rosenqvist replacing Nolan Siegel and Christian Lundgaard at Arrow McLaren 2027. We also reflect on Lundgaard's potential future, Nolan Siegel's options, as well as a little bit of Marcus Armstrong, as he signed a new deal with Marshak Racing. So we're not going to spend too much speaking about it on that episode because we have a standalone episode which you can listen to, which has all our thoughts on it. We're here to solely focus on Mid-Ohio and a very much a papaya party, Archie.
Yeah, it's the sort of weekend I feel like that team has really needed to show this year, because there was promise last year. Like, it's weird reflecting on last year because, ultimately O'Ward was second in the championship and, it's the best of his career, the best the team's ever achieved, but he was still 196 points behind Palou. So it's funny how you actually reflect on that. And I think we all still expected that they would kick on because it wasn't the closest they've ever come, but it was technically the closest they've come in terms of finishing position. And this year, it's just felt like they've regressed a little bit. I think there was talk only last month when we had that press conference with O'Ward, and he was talking about the fact that they may need to take a step backwards to go forwards. And it kind of felt like we were out of that period. Yeah, here he is again talking about transformation. But this was the sort of weekend that just felt necessary. There was no kind of puzzlement or bemusement from the very start. There was no kind of random loss of pace at any point. They executed very well. Obviously locked out the front row, which was kind of, it's the third time that's happened in the last couple of seasons now, but I feel like they've not always delivered in qualifying this year. And then, obviously finishing 1-2 is, evidence of what they've been chasing for a good while in terms of having two drivers able to finish at the front of the field, which obviously makes it all the more kind of illogical in some ways that they are abandoning one of those drivers, and that was announced 24 hours later. But this is kind of where the team has wanted to be and where we've kind of expected to see them make that extra stride forward. But we just hadn't quite seen that so far this season. We've seen a couple of wins from Lundgaard, obviously, but I think O'Ward's side is where it was kind of laid bare a bit that they were kind of struggling somewhat to knit everything together.
I'm finding it rather funny that we're speaking about them regressing, and it's only the second time since, it's the most wins they've got in a season since they came back to the series in 2020, which, I know the point you're trying to make, ultimately, consistency is there, the podiums aren't there. But it's funny that they're still getting all these wins despite us feeling like they're not operating particularly well. They've got 3 wins at this point in the season, and we still have 7 races left for them to get even more victories. So it's a funny one, really, isn't it? It feels like they haven't had a great season, but they've got 3 wins, which is more than any other team by Ganassi, I think I'm right in saying. So strange. It's strange, isn't it?
It is bizarre, and I think it kind of just aligns with that team. They are kind of a bit confusing. We spoke about it in our episode about the driver market and all the moves they've made. Like, there is confusion around certain parts of it. Obviously, the Lundgaard departure bit chiefly, but it's just kind of the nature of them that they are pretty streaky, and like the nature of that is the fact they have a really high ceiling, which we are seeing this year, but they also have quite a low floor, where I guess that's why, we mentioned it yesterday, but why Dixon is kind of coming in and bringing that leadership to kind of get rid of some of that just confusion that always seems to reign. But I guess just focusing on the O'Ward side, it had, obviously, as you mentioned, been 14 races without a podium. That's the longest streak in his career. In a fortnight's time, it would have been an entire year since he won that race in Toronto, which was his last podium. So that's a long time. And I think that is kind of where, as I mentioned, Arrow McLaren's kind of shortcomings is really presented, because O'Ward has been their golden boy, he's been their star, and him not delivering has just been slightly odd. And, he kind of referenced in the press conference after the race about, he's been aware of kind of some of the talk and some of the doubts around him, but he said he was never concerned. And I don't think anyone was really genuinely concerned that O'Ward was never going to return to victory lane or never be back on the podium again. I think it was absolutely only a matter of time, because it's not been a bad season. It was just, he obviously started off in that very consistent vein where he was finishing in the top 5, I think 6 of the first 8 races, but not managing to make the step beyond 4th and 5th and get that podium. And then, has to be fair, had a couple of more errant races since then. But yeah, this was a formality that this was going to happen. And I think for O'Ward, it was a pretty big statement on a weekend where obviously the news cycle was dominated by what's happening in those other 2 seats of the team, just to kind of lay down a marker that, he is still the guy there. And especially given the form that we've seen from Lundgaard on road courses, for O'Ward to take it to him and beat him in a straight fight and capitalise when the moment arose was really impressive. So I think that's a really good victory for O'Ward and a much needed one.
I mean, I was going to bring this up, but you kind of mentioned it there. I mean, it hasn't been about, I think there's a bit of an overreaction to O'Ward's having a catastrophic season. He's got no podium. Like, ultimately, he had so many top 5 finishes that, like, he wasn't performing at a level 2 off a podium. And Road America got hosed about 3 times, which cost him a good result there. Indy 500, depending on how you look at the podium in Indy 500, he was very close to finishing the top 3 in Indy 500 by literally mere thousandths of a second.
He could not have been closer, could he?
Well, but I was getting more to the point. Is the Indy 500 a podium, which is a debate we can save for another day.
Top 3.
Top 3 finish. And last year, like, Nashville, he was leading the race when he had that tyre failure. Portland, he was leading the race when he had that mechanical failure. So, like, it's a very different run of races if you take that into account. And he kind of said he's still in the championship picture. I still think it's a bit far-fetched. He'll need a couple of catastrophic Pillow races and a couple of other victories at tracks where we don't really know how they're going to go. We obviously won in Milwaukee a couple of years ago, and Nashville looked good last year, but the rest of them, a little bit of a lottery there. Mid-Ohio repeats as when he won in 2024. O'Ward doesn't tend to repeat at a lot of places. The only place he repeated that previously was Iowa. So a rare repeat victory there for O'Ward. And yeah, as you mentioned, like, it obviously started off in qualifying for McLaren. They rolled off pretty well, qualified 1-2, which they did at the Thermal Club last year. So only the second time in their history. And
Portland, but Lundgaard did start there. So
you are correct.
Technically, it is still a 1-2 qualifying finish.
Yes, you are correct. And Lundgaard did make a big point of that in the press conference. So I feel bad I've forgotten that now.
A lot's happened since then.
Yeah, he got an engine penalty in case you forgot after qualifying on pole. So O'Ward inherited that and he started 7th. But I guess that speaks to some of the improvement McLaren has made in the last couple of years. And you kind of always back to Lundgaard after taking pole position, but obviously traffic management is a big element of that. And Lundgaard made that little error into turn 2, which gave O'Ward the opportunity that he needed to take it around the outside of turn 4, make a pretty forceful move on Lundgaard, but obviously well within the limits there. It was a race that's proved very difficult to overtake. Like, we saw us up and down the field. Even the front runners are really struggling to get past lap traffic. One thing I found really funny is Fox's key moment in the race was O'Ward overtaking Dennis Hauger. How much the lap cars are causing a problem, how hard it was to overtake. So took the one opportunity he got and seized it. And obviously the 5 crew did exactly what they needed to do on pit road. And there was no problems there. So I think it's kind of the monkey off his back, which he really needed to get off after a difficult run of races. Championship picture, I think, he's not going to say that he's completely out of it, but he is 94 points off Pillow. So, it's still a Herculean mountain to climb. And there are off weekend for Pillow, which we'll get onto a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be pretty happy. Like, this is ultimately a result that he needed. And, I'm not going to say it's going to turn around his season all of a sudden, but definitely, I think probably for him, it feels good to get one up over Lundgaard as well on a road course, even if it doesn't really matter as of about 8 races.
I just want to kind of latch off the point you made about the racing. I feel like Mid-Ohio is kind of an imperfect storm for the heavy car that we have, obviously, with the hybrid, which has made it seem pretty difficult to pass on road and street courses generally. And the fact that Mid-Ohio is an incredibly narrow track. Like, no doubt it's probably a pretty good track to drive, but yeah, it wasn't the greatest spectacle. Let's put it that way. I still quite enjoyed the race. I think just because of all the narrative, and you obviously had the Aaron McLaren scrapping and Lundgaard fighting at the front when it became very clear that he was going to soon be announced to be departing that team. And yeah, I feel like there were just some decent storylines, and it was one of those races where there's kind of excitement in the anticipation of what might happen, and it never just quite comes to fruition. Like, there was never quite a scrap for the lead in the closing laps or whatever, but I didn't hate it as much. I know you were kind of pretty negative about it. I thought it was all right. Like, it ultimately, but it wasn't because the racing was phenomenal. I think it was more kind of a strategic crisscrossing and all of that stuff. And you must say, like, O'Ward's number 5 team played it perfectly. O'Ward executed the strategy perfectly. I think it was the final stop coming off the alternates, which were very much not the preferred tyres, off in that penultimate stint, and extended and actually came out about 3 seconds ahead of the pack of Lundgaard, Kirkwood, VK behind, which was pretty impressive. And that was kind of the buffer that really won in the race in the end and meant that he didn't come under much pressure in that closing exchange.
I mean, I'm not going to say I was completely negative about it, but it's one of those. I think Mid-Ohio has never been a great track for racing in recent times. Like, you have one overtaking opportunity, which is into turn 4, which even then is kind of a half overtaking opportunity because it's not like it's a heavy braking zone; it's a kind of medium braking zone. That's your only opportunity. And the way these cars are so heavy now, it just means it's hard to overtake. And I get what you mean. The storylines, like, is the Lundgaard revenge arc on all of a sudden? And you've got VK competing for the win, but as you said, it kind of just settled down the last couple of laps, which meant ultimately not much happened. And we all came into this weekend, as we always do. It's a road course. Alex Palou's never finished off the podium Mid-Ohio, and it's okay, how is Palou going to whitewash the field this weekend? But for the first time in, I can't remember how long, it felt like Palou was a little bit quiet on a road course. Not quiet that he's out front winning by 20 seconds, they have to show something else because he's in a league of his own. He was just kind of in the mid-pack, and I say that. He's still finished in the top 5, but it's the first time he hasn't led on a road course since the Indy GP2 in 2023. So, I mean, that's remarkable. It's been 3 years since he hasn't led on a road course. And his streak of top 5 on road course continues from that race I just mentioned, the Indy GP2 in 2023. So, he's still on a 3-year streak. I mean, one of the great shocks of the season was Alex Palou not making the Fast 6. It was him in 7th in the Fast 5. We're like, what? Palou hasn't made the Fast 6? Can you believe that? And he just never really seemed to make any progress from there. He kind of said they were lacking speed all weekend, which I guess is kind of evident judging by the performance because he never really seemed to match with people from him. Like, he closed down towards the closing laps, but it was never really in the victory contention, which is very rare for Alex Palou. And the first time, as I said, in his Chip Ganassi career that he's not stood on the podium Mid-Ohio. So I don't want to say an off weekend because you can't say 5th was a bad weekend in a caution-free race, but it's just not the level that Palou's often at, which just speaks volumes to how good he actually is.
Yeah, it kind of is an off weekend though, but that's by his standards, and that's just full credit to the standards that he's continued to raise in the series, isn't it, really? And yeah, I think 8th place start. I'm pretty sure they said in the broadcast, I haven't validated this, but I think they said it's his worst start since Road America in June 2024. So over 2 years on a road course, that is. Yeah, it just didn't make much progress. Like, he seemed to get a bit stuck behind that kind of pair of Rasmussen and Power, and then ultimately, actually, I think it was after the final stop, managed to navigate his way past pretty decisively. So that was kind of his race, really. Like, it's honestly a weekend where we come away from it and there's not much to say about Palou. I think it was pretty much a case of Ganassi's package just wasn't quite there. So yeah, pretty terrible weekend for Palou. 5th place, dreadful.
First time since the end of 2024, he's not finished on the podium 3 races in a row. And his pole streak came to an end as well, didn't he? He's obviously 5 in a row for pole positions, and this marked the end of it. So, disastrous weekend for Palou. I mean, I don't know why they got rid of Dixon at Ganassi. Should be getting rid of Palou after that performance.
I know, like, his championship lead is only 56 points.
Got cut though for once. Even it felt like the type of weekend that he's somehow still extended, but it did actually get cut for once. So,
but it still stands above the maximum points weekend. He could still sit out a weekend at this point and still have the championship lead. So yeah, that's something to note.
Yeah, and let's get on to why that gap was closed, which was Carl Kirkwood, long overdue. His first podium in a road course. I'm sure he'll be glad to finally get that done with. Kirkwood's got these weird quirks. It was like first season of Andretti, only top 5 for wins, and then he couldn't get a podium anywhere else other than the street course, and then eventually he won Gateway, and now he can get rid of all these statistics. Now he's finished on the podium on a road course. And I think that actually speaks quite a lot to Andretti's development on road courses this year, that it is clear a step forward has generally been made pace-wise on road courses, and that's across all 3 cars. Like, ultimately, it's still not consistent race to race, but we're seeing Power, Ericsson and Kirkwood. I'm not saying they're competing for the victory every weekend, but the bar has been raised slightly. And a year ago, you said Kirkwood would never have been competing for podiums in the road course, and now he looks a little bit more comfortable and just continues kind of, there's been a quiet couple of races for Kirkwood. Getting back on the podium, I feel like it's quite important. He is still within touching distance of Palou. There is a lot of work to do in the last 7 races of the season if he is going to overhaul Palou for a championship. But I think from his perspective, be a bit of a feel-good result. Finally getting that monkey off his back like O'Ward has, just to get that statistic out of the way. And having one up and below in a road course, I think is pretty significant for Andretti and Kirkwood. And, suddenly does that give them more opportunity later on in the year in places like Portland, for example, where maybe they're not expected to exceed that. I think, going into the weekend, you never would have said Andretti with that pace below, and they got it done this weekend. Look, he only gained 4 points on below, 5 points on below. So it's not like a massive swing in the championship all of a sudden. But I think from a kind of a confidence momentum standpoint, it's going to be a significant result for him.
Yeah, they were quick out of the blocks from the very start of the weekend, really, and obviously all qualified inside the top 10. I'm not entirely sure what happened to Ericsson in the race for him to drop from 7th to 21st. That's not brilliant. Power obviously qualified 3rd as well, which is another good effort.
I know Ericsson had a slow stop, but I don't think that was the entire reason.
Well, I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to say, but
we'll try and find out whilst you're
yeah, so Power qualifying 3rd as well. Like, I'd say that's pretty impressive. I think he's looking so much more comfortable, and I would say he's probably at the moment over a single lap the quickest guy in qualifying for them. And you'd almost argue that Kirkwood's the guy who's not getting it done in qualifying. I think, he was asked about it, and he said he was, because he topped his opening round of qualifying and then just didn't really factor in the fast 12, and said he was reluctant to really say what happened, but hinted towards some sort of tyre prep issue. One of the tyres just wasn't switched on. So yeah, that was interesting, but raced really well. And you mentioned it, we just haven't really seen him in recent rounds. He's kind of still been lurking there inside that top 3-4 in the championship, but just not really seen that much of him. So yeah, it's a good marker of their improvement to obviously have that first road course podium for Kirkwood. And he almost seemed like, I don't think embarrassed is the word, but he was almost like when it was pointed out to me, he was kind of a bit like, oh no, about it. Like, he just didn't really want to acknowledge the fact that he hadn't, because it's kind of wild for a driver of his potential and his talent and what he has produced in these few years with Andretti. Like, it's his 4th year with the team, and it's only now is he getting his first road course podium. It's his 5th year in IndyCar. So for a driver of his stature, like, pretty mad, really.
I'm now very interested to see how many podiums his teammates have got in the same time of road courses as he has. I'll try and do that research a little bit later. And Ericsson's race, as I said, he's still in the pits, which they say lost him valuable track time, and then got a penalty for colliding with Dixon, but that only cost him 2 positions. So I still don't really know how he ended up in 21st, but it just looks like the kind of a few small things, and then he couldn't really make any progress in the race. He couldn't really overtake.
Kirkwood, just a final point on him, was kind of the picture of how spent some of these drivers were in a full green race in the absolutely blaring heat at Mid-Ohio. In the press conference, he was leaning his arms on the table in a very kind of interesting way for the entire press conference, because he just couldn't keep his shoulders up because they were that kind of, I guess, wounded from how physical a race it had been. Scott McLaughlin's cool suit failed on lap 3 or something, I think he said, which is a pretty harrowing experience, really, because that's just heating him up rather than cooling him down. And saw him after the race looking on the Fox pictures looking pretty worse for wear. So I think the drivers were pretty beaten up after this one. So I guess full credit to them all for really getting through. And only Dennis Hauger actually finished off the lead lap in a race that went green the whole way on the road course that isn't particularly long. So fair play. We might say quite a bit about how hard it was to overtake even back markers, but yeah, fair play.
So in Kirkwood's tenure of Andretti, his teammates have finished on the podium in a road course a total of 3 times, once per season. So
it's more of a reflection.
It's a package thing. Yeah, more than the Kirkwood thing, but it's just funny how he hasn't got to that point. Whilst we're kind of touching on the championship picture, it's still very much in inverted commas. David Malukas is still kind of the other guy in the mix. Kirkwood, Lundgaard, and Malukas have all been very close. They're now only separated by 10 points, so Ward is a little bit further back. Malukas ended up finishing 8th in the end. He once again qualified very well in 4th, just didn't seem to have the pace of the front runners. And he was still, once again, the best performing Team Penske driver, as has become a formality this season. But just didn't quite have the speed that we've seen him do at other races this season. He also had a difficult pit stop, I think.
Yeah, he had a bit of a bobble on his second stop, I think. So that was part of it. But 8th place being a bad weekend for Malukas by the standards of the season, because it genuinely is one of his worst results of the year, is just a marker of how much he's really impressed this season. Because I think coming into the year, you would have said if he was regularly picking up results like this, he's probably had a decent first year with Penske. So the fact that we are reflecting on that being, a less good day, I guess, is just a marker of how well he has performed this year. So Yeah, I mean, he was in the Fast Six again. I mean, there's some pretty impressive stats that he's qualified inside the top 5, 9 out of 11 races so far this season. His 5 road and street course Fast Six appearances, or there have been 5 road and street course Fast Six appearances where he has been the only Penske in that round of qualifying. So he continues to impress much more than his teammates. Newgarden, to be fair to him, another pretty heroic drive to finish inside the top 10, qualified 9th, finished 9th with still a wounded foot.
Yes, confirmed his right foot breaking now. So Road America were kind of speculating it on the broadcast. At least they said he's now right foot breaking, which is not the easiest thing, having to control 2 pedals with 1 foot. I mean, he skipped the test as well. Obviously, Felipe Nasr stood in for him at the recent Mid-Ohio test, so he didn't even get the advantage of that. So, yeah, as you say, pretty heroic effort to finish 9th once again in the end. Like, he almost seems to be driving better with this difficult foot. Like, Road America would have been another top 10 without the penalties. That would have been 4 in a row since he injured it for top 10s.
This is kind of what you should have picked up at Road America. And I mean, at this point situation, I mean, he's still 6th, to be fair. He could probably be, if it wasn't for losing all those points at Road America, a bit closer to O'Ward. He is 40 points behind O'Ward. And
set the fastest lap, though, by the way, and ended up qualifying 9th in the end, which again, pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good effort, that. And I think it's another concerning weekend for McLaren, who had to start down in 23rd because of an engine having an issue in warm-up, but he was still only going to start 17th and only recovered 7 positions from 23rd to 16th. I know it was an all-green race and it was hard to pass, but still a pretty tough weekend for McLaren, who is down. He's 8th in points. He is only 8 points behind Newgarden, but still not quite what you'd be expecting in this rebound year from him. He's not really at all close to being in that top 5 pack. Or
does it not feel very similar to last year for you? We had a really good St. Pete, and ever since has just been a bit nowhere. Like, he's had the odd good result, but I wouldn't necessarily say good weekend, and he's just...
I'd argue almost like a bit more nowhere. Like, I think there were still points last year where like he was running at the front and things would go wrong, because that's just how Penske's year went. Whereas this year, like, he just hasn't really even been that factor, I wouldn't say. So it's an important, like, I'm not saying his future's in doubt or anything, but it's just an important stretch to end the season, because he is now getting towards being 2 years without a win. So really needs to kind of get back to that.
I mean, he's got 5 finishes outside the top 10 this season, which is crazy. And he's still somehow 8th in points, only 8 points with his teammate in 6th. Again, the standings have been a bit strange this year. We kind of got a lot of clusters as such. And I just don't know what to think. Like, we've said this a lot. And, you know, we were expecting McLaren kind of after his great 2024 to really kick on and be a contender week in, week out, no matter the track type. And it never feels like we come into a weekend where he's top Penske, like, let alone the top of the pack. When was the last weekend, apart from, say, well, I guess St. Pete, where he was just a top Penske driver? And, like, he's not driving terribly. He's just inconsistent at the minute and just not delivering at a particularly high level like we've seen him do in his past, which is weird. I don't know what's happened the last couple of years for this to be more difficult, but mystery.
I mean, he's obviously had an engineering change this year, which, you know, when we spoke to him in that media call a few weeks ago, he'd kind of pointed towards that being, at least at the start of the year, a little bit destabilizing. And obviously last year, all of the turmoil that happened within Penske as well was also probably a little bit unsettling. But he'd also kind of said that it's all started to gel now after just at the initial first few rounds. So I don't know whether there's still lingering effects there, whether there are purely just off the back of the year of last year, just teething problems that continue to plague them as they kind of build their way up and try and almost develop their way back to where they were. I don't know, but it's been, just a strange and pretty underwhelming year. And I think this was a real picture of that.
On a very different note, we had our third Penske throwback livery with Newgarden this weekend. So now I've seen them all. What is your favourite?
It's got to be the McLaren Gateway one for sure.
Okay, fine. I wasn't as big of a fan as this one. I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't really, we've got no understanding of the car, that race, necessarily significance of it. I just felt like it looked a bit, I don't know the word, patchy, put together.
I think the PPG livery stood out a little bit too much because it didn't really fit with the colour scheme.
Yeah, yes. I mean, the Gateway one, McLaren, I kind of got a bit bored of it by the end. Like, it looks great, but it's not very advanced liveries. It's just 2 red stripes basically. Malucas's was quite cool, to be fair, but like it's too recent to be a throwback livery for me. Is the problem I had with that one. So anyway, viewers, let us know your thoughts. What was your favourite? I wonder if we get any more this year. I hope we did, because I mean it's a fun scheme. I don't see why you couldn't do more. Like Penske got such a rich history that why not?
Still 7 races to go, so plenty of time.
Yeah, let's hope we get some more. And it's about time, Archie. You've procrastinated long enough. I know you want to speak about Rinus VeeKay, one of yet again his best weekend of the season so far, with a 4th place finish, qualified well in 6th, and Hunkos's best result in since Daly's podium at Milwaukee in 24. So a great run for Rinus VeeKay. Looked quick all weekend, and we spoke about in our silly season episode earlier this week that he's going to be a guy who was very much going to be in the picture for some of the seats that are available in the market for 2027, and no better time to get such a good result and just show it wasn't by any means luck. It was just a well executed, strong performance from VeeKay all weekend long.
Yeah, purely on merit, and I think I said this in the silly season podcast, but it would have been very much deserved if he was on the podium, and even finishing 4th at levels their best ever results on a road course. And we've spoken all year about him being really a great maximizer, and maximizing this year with JHR has sometimes been a finish in the high teens, because that's kind of just been what's been at his disposal. Their package has been pretty inconsistent, and finally felt like they had a weekend here where they were pretty strong on all fronts. Like Stingray Rob qualified really well, was only fractionally out of making his first fast 12, which was a shame for him. But when VeeKay had the opportunity with a package this strong, once again maximizes and is up there. I mean, at one point felt like he could possibly contend for the win. Obviously, he didn't quite have the pace of Aaron McLaren, who clearly really had the best package this weekend, which is full credit to them. But I mean, VeeKay was running ahead of Kirkwood, ahead of Palou for the vast majority of the race. And it's an interesting one, because if VeeKay gets his opportunity at a top team, who's to say he can't be in a class with the likes of a Kirkwood or a Lundgaard or a Malukas? I'm not going to say he's holding off Palou. He's going to be the next Alex Palou, but we simply don't know, because he's not had that opportunity, which is another reason why I really think it is high time that he does get that shot in a big ride. It's just more than deserved. And yeah, stood up to some real big dogs this weekend in, for essentially the smallest team in the series, which is, very akin to what we saw him do. I mean, it was quite a similar drive to what we saw in some ways to Barber last year, or obviously Toronto, which was a more strategic race when he was on the podium there. But it was very similar to Barber with Dale Coyne Racing last year, where he is purely fighting up there on merit, and just tremendous. And it would be a travesty if a top team doesn't give him an opportunity once again, because 7 years in the series now, and these last 2 have been a seriously big proving ground, and this weekend just was the crux of that, really.
I mean, I think the difficult thing for VeeKay is we've never really had a teammate to give us a good assessment as to what level he's racing at. And, eventually there will be a time that will come which we will get that assessment and comparison to a teammate who hopefully is a bit further up the pecking order, who we can kind of see where VeeKay is performing at a level in comparison to. But an all-round, just really good weekend. I mean, I can't remember a weekend recently where Hunkos have just been really strong across both cars. I mean, it was a shame that Rob ended up 22nd at the end after you mentioned qualifying pretty well. He got an engine penalty, actually, didn't he? So he ended up starting 20th, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, he was like razor thin margins close to the fast 12, and he thought he could have made it. So was pretty disappointed in the end there. One more driver I do actually just want to briefly touch on is Christian Rasmussen, because we've spoken a lot about, how is he going to do on road courses? He needs to raise his game with his new contract. And Mid-Ohio is a track he's gone well at before. It's a track he got his first career top 10 on. And this felt like a big step forward for Rasmussen this weekend on a road street course, which we haven't really seen maybe ever in his IndyCar career. Qualified 5th at the end. That was his best ever IndyCar start, believe it or not. And he kind of just ran slightly lower than that for the majority of the race, finished 7th. But, kind of reproving the faith that Ed Carpenter put in him by giving him this new multi-year contract extension, which we were, questionable about giving him that length of service for somebody so unproven on road street courses. And look, it's still early days, but he had a better Road America. This was a good weekend all round. And there's obviously plenty of opportunities for him to show for the rest of the season what he can do on road street courses. So I just think an important weekend for him to get a good road street course result under his belt, which he hasn't had in a while.
Yeah, I think this was possibly evidence of the fact that he's just being given that environment to flourish in without having that weight of, if he doesn't perform, he's in a contract year or whatever. Yeah, he's obviously locked down, as we spoke about when that first happened. And yeah, this was the side of his game where we know how brilliant he is on ovals, but he's been very unproven. And I wouldn't even say he's been particularly inconsistent on road and street courses, more than he just hasn't been that quick. Not necessarily not been quick, he just hasn't put it all together that regularly at all. So for him to not only qualify well, which we've seen sparingly, but we have seen happen, but then capitalize on qualifying well, and obviously, as you say, he's never qualified this well, but then capitalize on it, get the job done in the race where, I think back to, where was it? Was it Detroit where he qualified pretty well? Or yeah, I think it was Detroit where he qualified pretty well, then hit the wall very early in the race, and that feels like something we just have seen from him. So to get the job done in a road and street course race as well after qualifying well felt like a bit of a statement, and especially when you consider, and I know Rossi is still battling with his injury, and I guess that will hopefully have subsided soon enough. But Rossi started 16th, so 11 positions lower, and finished the race in 20th, and was one of the back markers for a portion of that race. So outperformed Rossi, who has been obviously very accomplished on road and street courses. So I'd argue, not saying it's the best weekend of his IndyCar career, because he's podiumed on ovals and he's got to win on ovals, but it's up there just purely because we haven't seen this sort of thing from him. And on a road and street course, it is unquestionably, I would say, his best weekend.
So let's go over the running order for Mid-Ohio. So Pato O'Ward victorious ahead of his teammate Christian Lundgaard and Carl Kirkwood running out the podium. Rinus VeeKay, a joint season best in fourth ahead of Alex Palou. Will Power finished sixth in the end after qualifying third, a third top 10 in the row for Will Power. So his season's starting to get a little bit more on track than it was previously. Christian Rasmussen is seventh, David Malukas in eighth, Joseph Newgarden ninth, and Jonas Siegel rounding out your top 10. Another better weekend from Siegel. It's just, unfortunately for him, a little bit of too little too late. Kai Collette in 11th. When is Kai Collette going to get his first top 10? It's like Malukas in his first win. It's like he's perennially close to achieving it, but just can't quite get it over the line. I'm
sure there was something about having a bit of contact with Hauger that denied him this top 10. I can't remember where I saw that, actually. But interesting. Well. But another Fast 12 qualifying performance, once again outperforming Santino Ferrucci. So another, I guess statement weekend's a bit extreme when he's, it's 11th. But again, for a rookie driver against a pretty experienced teammate who's obviously done some good things with that team a couple of years ago is very impressive, because he currently seems to be in a bit of a different league to Ferrucci.
And some good inroads in the Rookie of the Year battle as well. He's got it down to 16 points, so he gained another 14 there. He's got a better finish than Hauger in each of the last three races.
Nashville should be interesting. Like, I mean, obviously, Dale Coyne Racing, we thought, this Andretti bond, which maybe isn't quite as strong as we maybe anticipated pre-season, could really help them make a step forward on ovals, and we haven't really seen that. But obviously, Gateway Collette really put on a show, so Nashville's going to be pretty intriguing for that. And obviously, We've got the Milwaukee double to come up as well at the back end of August.
Graham Rahal finished in 12th. Very quiet weekend for Meyershank Racing. Rosenqvist in 13th, Armstrong in 14th.
Poor weekend for Armstrong. I mean, he had a crash in the test, and then had a car issue that made him crash in opening practice. Qualifies down basically at the back of the field, and I guess to make up 10 positions and be the biggest mover, which I'm still slightly flabbergasted by the Instagram post.
That was my funny moment for later. We'll have to save that.
Yeah, we'll save that then. Keep listening, guys. But to make 10 positions up in an all-green race, I suppose isn't actually that bad an effort, to be fair. But yeah, strangely anomalous weekend. No, I think he was just set on the back foot, I think, obviously by a crash that wasn't really his fault. But then, yeah, clearly just didn't re-salvage the pace. And as you say, obviously, Rosenqvist starts 13th, finishes 13th, and kind of aligns with the fact Ganassi didn't have a very good weekend as well. So there you have that.
Yeah, it's kind of the shanking consistency, which really let them down. I hope we don't have what we had last year, where their form just tails off completely the second half of the season.
11th, 12th, 13th, all started in the position.
I know, I'm looking at this in the results order. I was saying to you, I thought the top 10 who start in the top 10 will finish in the top 10. But Siegel qualified 14th, finished 10th, and Ericsson started 7th, finished 21st. So it was so close to probably a rare bit of IndyCar statistic history. I think
this probably shows, generally speaking, how little manoeuvrability there was through the pack.
15th place was Kip and Simpson ahead of McLaughlin, and 16th. Dixon was 17th. It was also very amusing when Lynn was lap Dixon. Didn't quite pan out in the end, but I mean, another really rough weekend for Dixon.
Yeah, I mean, he was screwed in qualifying. Well, screwed himself in qualifying, or the team screwed themselves in qualifying, because on consecutive laps he ends up blocking and interfering with Grosjean, which obviously loses him his. Does it lose his 2 quickest laps?
Yes, lose him his 2 quickest laps.
So that's his qualifying screwed. So he starts down in 22nd, and yeah, I mean, he was shock horror, the first guy in the pits, but it didn't yield anything.
Louis Foster ends up being 18th. Pretty quiet weekend, pretty disappointing weekend for RLL actually all around after, they've made some improvements on road courses, so not translated there. Santino Ferrucci 90th, pretty bad weekend for him. Alexander Rossi 20th, Ericsson ended up 21st with Rob 22nd, Grosjean 23rd, and Schumacher 24th, and Hauger 25th.
Just on Schumacher, I think this was, at least for a period, this was his best road course race, and I know the bar isn't particularly high, but he was pushing for that fast 12 and ultimately qualifies 15th. I honestly don't know what happens to him in the race, because I don't know whether he got a bad start or whatever, because that's, a lot of positions to lose. At pit lane, I honestly don't know what happened, but there were some promising signs there. Like on a pace front and looking at qualifying, he actually had the measure of Foster, which is something given Foster obviously was a pole sitter last year. Just, it's a weird one. Louis obviously had those couple of 7th place finishes, and kind of since then hasn't really factored again. So yeah, it's probably a disappointing weekend for that team, because they have shown strength on road courses, obviously. But I mean, Road America wasn't brilliant for them either. Graham Rahal kind of almost flukes into the podium that he almost got, and yeah, just feels like a little bit of a regression there in this portion of the season.
Reading RLL's report, just seems like I didn't have a pace. He said struggled to get tyres to switch on their out laps. Start on the res, let them down a little bit, but ultimately just looks like more of a pace than anything else. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm a bit concerned that we really haven't seen anything from Schumacher in a little while now. Like, we speak about these small wins, but it's only, fringes of the fast 12, or, we don't really see him that often in races. His best result of the season, I still think, is 15th, 16th, and, we're 11 races in now. It's like, when does he kick on a little bit? And
he's had a lot of engineering changes, which I think
this is 4th.
Usually points towards a bit of displeasure with how things are operating, or not gelling with certain people. So he's evidently not gelled with many people. I don't know whether that's not giving him the platform to, feel comfortable in the car and progress as he would like. I don't know what's causing all of this, but yeah, obviously that's never going to be conducive to success. I know the changes are because the engineering team that are in place isn't necessarily working out, but the more changes you have, he just needs to somehow get a bit of steadiness in this back end of the season, and hope that this latest change is the change and the definitive change, because it's just been a bit of an all over the place year, really.
I think we just need to see some improvement, and obviously there's a lot more discussion on what they're going to do next year, and it feels like it's more of a RLL decision now and the Schumacher decision whether he's returning or not, because ultimately he's not at a level where he should be returning for next season. Like, he is, there's no other way of saying it, last in the championship with only 7 races to go. Like, yes, the argument is there's so much learning for him to do, but we've seen other rookies come in and pick this up pretty quickly. Like, even people who've come from the F1 ladder, like, look at Grosjean's like coin season, for example, and he's getting multiple podiums. Like, I don't know where it's just gone wrong. Like,
I would also make the point again that RLL have struggled with 3 cars. I think they're really struggling to get 3 drivers that can perform on that team.
You're absolutely right. Like,
and I don't know how much of it might be that as well. I think they almost, I feel like when they made that move, they've kind of taken or bitten off more than they can chew. I don't know whether that is also part of it, possibly. I wouldn't rush to judge. Like, ultimately, rookie years can look very different for different drivers, and Schumacher had been away from single-seater racing for a little while, and it's very, very different to what he was used to in F1. So it is a lot to get used to. How much is the wrist injury that he sustained on the very first lap of the season in St. Pete impacting him? Unsure. But obviously there's a heck of a lot to prove here, because
it's a results-based business, and there's no real results. And it's not like we've seen flashes. Like, Collette hasn't got results, but we've seen flashes from him, especially in the last couple of races. It feels like Schumacher hasn't really kicked on since day one, to me. And you're right about that for the third car. You look at Jack Harvey came in with so much promise after such a great time at Shank Racing. Pietro Fittipaldi didn't have a top 10 that season. Devin Di Francesco did not have a good 2025. Like, you're right, there's always that third car which has let them down a little bit, but Schumacher's got you'd like to think a pretty big pedigree in the global motorsport world, and I just want to see a little bit more. And like, you don't think it's going to come at Nashville and Milwaukee. He's running out of time.
If you want to lay bare how few results he's picked up, he is only 84 points ahead of Connor Daly in the standings. Connor Daly only ran the Indy 500. That's just sprung out to me. He's only on 108 points from 11 races.
And he's tied on points to Stingray Rob, but then it's a little gap of 24 points to Colin. That's like a good percentage of his points. Like, I don't know. I don't know if we're overreacting here, but I just want to see him kick on a little bit more as we get to the second half of the season. So, top 3 drivers of the weekend. I think there was a fairly obvious top 2. It depends just what order you put them in and who's your third. I think it's got to be O'Ward Lundgaard is your
VK O'Ward Lundgaard.
You picked VK first?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I might have done that at Gateway as well, to be honest. But
I think you did, yeah.
This time I genuinely am VK O'Ward Lundgaard for me.
Well, there's a shock to long-time listeners of the podcast. No surprises there. Right, unsung hero. I feel like I know what you're going to say here.
I think we probably just both go for the same driver here, and it's quite obviously Christian Rasmussen.
Oh,
really? Not Rasmussen?
No, I thought you weren't going to say Rasmussen. I thought you were going to say Newgarden.
Okay. Oh, yeah. To be fair, that was actually a good shout. To be fair,
thank you.
But I would say Rasmussen just because this is. I think it's best weekend.
Power would say Rasmussen.
When did he say that?
Do you not see this? This was like the clip of him and Newgarden speaking about Denmark in the World Cup. And he's like Rasmussen, and Newgarden's like, "How did you say that?"
Yeah, Newgarden's a good shout actually as well. To be fair,
Siegel
getting the job done. Yeah, Siegel decent.
Yeah.
I think Newgarden.
Power.
I mean, I gave it to Newgarden for Road America actually, and actually got the job done this time. So. Yeah, that's also actually a fair shout. It's not that much of a no-brainer, but I'd say toss it between Newgarden and Rasmussen, really. Albeit Power finishing 6th is actually genuinely a very good weekend for how his season always started. It feels like finally just started to stabilise a little bit.
Okay, funny moments. We were teased early. Might as well get back to it.
Yeah, you go into it, Dan. This is the only one I've got in my head.
I spotted it first. Well, firstly, Will Buxton said...
We were both on the same page. I think you'd already sent it somewhere, and I then sent it somewhere else saying, "Is this AI? Like, what is this?"
So yeah, if you haven't seen it, there's like a biggest mover award. It's one of those rubbish marketing awards IndyCar hands out for the. If you start last, you've got a pretty good job at getting it. And there's a picture of Armstrong getting it, but it looks AI generated. It's like his face is just like so narrow, and his eyes are just staring off into absolutely like. The abyss, basically. And like we've been looking at this for days and we're like, this has to be AI generated. There's no way that's Marcus Armstrong. And some of the comments from drivers under it make it even funnier. So I'll read some of them out now. Callum Ilott, blink if you need help at Marcus Armstrong. Alex Pillow, what happened to the first pick at Marcus Armstrong? Reply by Felix Rosenqvist, fault only downloaded to 63%. Rosenqvist says another comment, Marcus stunt doubled in the first pick. So if you haven't seen it for yourself, there's this bizarre AI generated image of Armstrong. I don't know how that's ended up there.
It's absolutely baffling. Unless it's just not AI and it's just the camera's had a malfunction. Because I don't know, like, there's nothing else that to me would scream that it's AI because, like, his suit's right and the logos are right. There's no, like, messed up writing.
Like, even, like, his pimples are in the right place and stuff. It's, like...
It's just so strange.
Face. I've got no idea. I don't know if you picked... I think you did pick it up. Will Buxton said Louis Armstrong again, I think I'm right in saying. Yeah. So I don't know how that keeps it coming out.
I think he stopped short of saying the whole hog, but I think it was Louis Art. Oh, that was quite amusing. But I missed the first 2 days of this weekend, so I kind of missed out on some of funny moments that may have occurred.
You haven't watched back second practice yet?
Second practice was the only thing I didn't watch. I watched the highlights after I watched qualifying.
This was the whole thing. What, 2 years ago?
Yeah, I watched the highlights,
second practice,
and the incidents. But that was all I had time for, unfortunately.
We're on a difficult streak of funny moments. I think we need something to.
We need Dennis Hauger to
pick it
find a
back up.
rocket launcher again.
Anyway, talking of Hauger, this has just sprung to mind because we forgot to mention earlier. We're not speaking about rocket launchers, unfortunately, but if he comes back on the pod at some point later in the year, we will ask him about the rocket launcher because I don't think we've seen him since. So we need to catch up with him on the show, speaking about his rocket launcher. But we did speak to him midweek about a couple of topics to do with his season so far. He was busy watching Norway Ivory Coast game through the entirety of this, which was pretty amusing as well. So he's staring off in distance. He was watching that game. Norway ended up winning. They've got England next in the World Cup, so we were obviously a little bit nervous about that. So we'll see how that pans out. But here's Dennis Hauger on a couple of questions we asked him earlier on this week.
You've obviously had a fair amount of time now to kind of adapt and reflect on the season so far. So I guess coming into the preseason and your expectations, maybe what have been some of the biggest challenges, the biggest learning curves that you've had to embrace since you've come to IndyCar?
I mean, I've been pretty happy. I feel like I've maximized like the car and the results 90% of the year so far, which is, I think, really good as a rookie. I think the only time I've actually really made a mistake was at the 500 when I got that penalty for speeding in pit lane, and which was super annoying because we started P29 and I was actually right behind Felix before that last pit stop. And I was, I had passed, I passed Armstrong before he pitted as well. So like we were flying and it was just super annoying, but it's just one of those things as a rookie, I think, when you look at the same penalties last year for the rookies and years before that, it was a typical thing, but that one beats me up quite a bit, I think. But I mean, just being in that position as well and having that pace was super awesome and one of the coolest things I've ever done, I think, by far. So that one beats me up, but otherwise been pretty happy. Just been building experience every weekend. I think one of the biggest things for us as a team has been minimizing mistakes. Like we've had some small stuff here and there, starting the weekend off with some stuff that should be in place that is not. And I think that's kind of where we have potential to build, because you're always going to be a bit on the back foot by then. So otherwise, I feel like when we have those clean weekends, we get results. So, and I think we've shown that several times. So for me right now, it's just going to be about keeping that going. We had a really clean test in Mid-Ohio, and I think we showed some good results there as well. So the goal will be to start off where we left there in the race weekend and hopefully not have any issues as we go.
And if we look at the Rookie of the Year battle, you do have a little bit of a gap towards Kyle and Mick. So is that something you kind of pay attention to as the season goes on? And like, obviously you're focusing on the individual races to maximize the result. In the grand scheme of things, is that something the second half of the season you particularly want to place an emphasis on and trying to achieve that? Or is it just something that you naturally don't really think about?
I mean, if I was fighting for a championship, like overall championship, I would think about it, right? So why wouldn't I think about the rookie championship as well? It only makes sense. If I can win the championship, I might as well try and win the rookie one. But to be honest, I've not focused on it too much. Like every weekend, I just try to get the most out of myself and try and get a good results. And the results we get and everything we do throughout the weekend is just, an end results of the point standings and everything. So just taking it step by step in that sense and not really focusing on that specifically, but for sure, you're only going to be a rookie once. So I want to get that for sure. I don't think like I've been sitting in the best car probably compared to like Kyle maybe at times, but we've still had some really good race pace and race results. So I think that's been really cool. So hopefully we can keep that going. 30 points is not a lot, so it can turn around quickly. Like Gateway was when I DNF'd before we even started. That was a day that could have changed things really quickly again. And AJ Foyt, for example, and Rahal, to be honest, had really good pace in Road America as well. But we seem to always salvage something compared to them in the race. So I feel like there's potential for us to go even further, and hopefully we can start gaining even more points.
So let's go on to the Podium Predictor tournament. A lot of Lundgaard shouts this week. A surprisingly decent number of Kirkwood shouts, a lot of below shouts, shock, which actually ended up being worth 0 points for the first time in a very long time. I'll say first time for a very long time, the road course. I did get on the podium at Road America, so I don't know where I'm getting that from. But anyway, let's start off with your low scorers this week. So our good friend James went for Palou, Kirkwood, and Dixon. So got 2 points for Kirkwood. Other 2 point scorer was the writers who went for Lundgaard, Palou, and VK. So 2 points for Lundgaard there. And then we go on to the people who got 3 points and 1 spot on. So this was all Christian Lundgaard and P2. So I went for Palou, Lundgaard, McLaren. Archie went very similar for Palou, Lundgaard, Power. And Will Buxton went exactly the same as you with Palou, Lundgaard, Power. And then we had 2 6 points this week, as both Tom and the fans went for Palou, Lundgaard, and Kirkwood. So good score on week for them with 6. So championship standings, it's now getting very tight. So you've got the writers at the bottom on 26. Pretty big gap. Will on 29. And then you have a little bit of a jump to James on 33. And then you've got your fans and Tom Gaymore on 35. And we are both on 36, Archie. So it's got tight all of a sudden. Very tight.
Yeah, I had like a 6 point lead at one point. It was the one race where I changed the prediction last minute and I lost out on what would have been 6 points.
So there is 1 point separating the top 4. That is...
I'm going to rue that forever.
Very close. I mean, still 7 races left. So don't give up. And we'll get back to you with the results for the Fast 6 very shortly. Okay, Fast 6 predicted tournament. It was a very rare Fast 6 where we didn't have Alex Palou earn a point. What I will say is some of you may remember that very iconic moment at the end of last episode where we had that massive link up between all these different drivers. It turns out we got it wrong. I don't know how. We actually ended up both putting David Malukas for some reason. For some reason, we thought only I put him. I put Pato O'Ward, not David Malukas, which ruins the fun of it a little bit, but it doesn't really, because you still put Dixon and Rosenqvist in, who are 2 future teammates of O'Ward. And then we have O'Ward and Armstrong, which I don't really know how those two go together at all, but they're close together, Indy 500, but that's about it.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
So that's a shame. Anyway, let's go on to the results of this week. It's still pretty close nonetheless. So we both earned points for Christian Lundgaard. You were doubting for the Lundgaard in the end. I mean, good job you did, because that earned you a mark. David Maluka seems to be an absolute stat pad mark at the minute. And then you didn't get any others, I don't believe. And
No, because my others were Palou, Armstrong, Rosenqvist, and Dixon.
So, and I had Palou, McLaren, Ericsson, and Pato O'Ward. So for week 1006, I get an extra point onto my lead. We need to go back and find the last week where I didn't gain 1 point in you, because this is ridiculous.
You now have an entire qualifying lead. It's 33-27. So I feel like in the years that we've been doing this, it hasn't been this one-sided at any point, really. And it's not even like it's been one-sided in any week in particular. It's just been
just 1 point every single week.
Solitary points every single week. So
I will try and find out before the next episode when the last time that it wasn't a 1 point gain was, because it's been a ridiculous amount of races now. So anyway, for my sake, long may it continue. You want it to be a close championship battle. When do you start risking it? Like, because you can't
Milwaukee
risk it.
Milwaukee double header, maybe.
Yeah, because you can't risk it if you're 6 behind, because by Nashville, it's not the season 9 Nashville. By Laguna Seca, that's kind of too little, too late. So I don't know. It's not getting to the point now, but if you're not closing it anymore, you can start thinking about it.
Yeah, agree. Yes.
Anyway, let's get back to our Nashville Fast 6 predictions, which we'll have very shortly, and hopefully more amazing links this week, which will actually work out the correct drivers for. Okay, right. I'm just telling you in advance, I've got the most boring Fast 6 you've ever heard. So
yeah, I tried to go a little bit different, but then I bottled it a little bit, so I might have a little bit of difference, but we'll see.
Triple Penske?
No, I didn't put Newgarden in there.
Not going triple Penske in the Nova. That must be the first time.
Yeah, he just
ever.
I mean, he wasn't there at Gateway. He was there in Nashville last year. Still got the foot might be a bit recovered, to be fair, in a couple of weeks' time.
I mean, he won Gateway with the foot. I know that was before he had surgery.
But he also didn't qualify inside the Fast 6, I don't think so.
Well, he qualified 7th, I think. It's not like he was miles off.
Still wasn't the Fast 6.
Well, anyway, who have you put instead of him?
Well, it's hard to say. Have you got Palou and O'Ward?
Yes.
Okay, so Kirkwood?
No.
And how about Power?
No.
Okay, so we've got
Rosenqvist and Newgarden. I've got, and then you've got Aaron Kirk. So you're banking on Andretti a little bit. Andretti didn't qualify very well here last year.
I think that's my, because they did the year prior and they qualified pretty well. Well, Kirkwood at least qualified pretty well at Gateway. Gets a decent slot running late, obviously being up in second in the championship. So yeah, I'm kind of feel like I need to start banking on some things if I can gain 2 points back on you, hopefully. But I mean, you're not putting Newgarden as pretty bold, but I'm going to have to go for that now because only 7 left.
We're 2.5 years in and we still have never finished. We never got a top 6 all correct. Like,
this might be the one.
We've been close. So what's our battles this week? So Newgarden versus Power. Easy. Former teammates, no problem at all. Kirkwood
and Rosenqvist, Long Beach Merchants.
Yeah, that would do. Kirkwood, sorry, I'm thinking Newgarden versus Kirkwood.
Both have 2s on their car. They're both
Americans. A good battle at
Phoenix.
They had a good battle at Phoenix. Doesn't really mean anything, but they had a good battle at Phoenix.
Well, we've got a battle for this. What about Power Rosenqvist? Both got 6s on their car.
Yeah, we're
not American.
This week.
Non-American 6s and American 2s.
Yeah, that feels like a bit of a stretch week. Not quite last week, is it? That's kind of it, really, for Mid-Ohio. Obviously, 2 weeks until IndyCar goes racing at Nashville Super Speedway. And before then, we will obviously have content. So we've got a exclusive Indy Next interview coming later this week, which is a really, really good listen. Would definitely recommend listening to that. It might be from somebody who you might be surprised to hear from, but one I would say is definitely worth your time listening. Indy Next debrief will be out early next week, probably looking at Sunday and Monday, and then as usual we'll have an episode next Tuesday, TBD on what that's going to be, but you'll find out. So a lot of content this week. Not only do you get your race review, you get an extra interview, you get Indy Next debrief, you get our silly season roundup. So daily podcast until Nashville. It might be at this rate. But yeah, lots of good episodes coming out. So would definitely listen to it. And yeah, stay tuned. But for this time, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening. See you.
Ciao.